Thank you all very much. You take seats. There's one or two up here towards the front as well. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance. My name is Alex White. I'm Director General here at the Institute. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon for this, what I know is going to be a really stimulating and interesting event, Getting Ireland AI Ready. So as I say, welcome if you're here in the room, welcome if you're watching online, as many people are. And I'm sure, along with everybody else, very much looking forward to hearing what our stellar panelists have to say, but in particular, what our guest of honour, if I may describe her as such, Niamh Smith, Minister for Trade Promotion, AI and Digital Transformation, which must be one of the most interesting and exciting even roles in government at this time. So Joyce O'Connor, thank you very much, the chair of our digital group here at the Institute. Thanks for all the work that the group does. And I'm going to hand over to Joyce now, Professor Joyce O'Connor, to introduce the speakers and to moderate the event. Thank you very much, Joyce.
Thanks very much, Alex. And thank you. And good afternoon to all of you here today. We've a great event today, Getting Ireland AI Ready. What a really topical and important one that we're going to look at. So it's a warm welcome to all of you here in the IIEA, North Great Georgia Street, and to our online audience. This event today is organised in conjunction with the Economic Regulators Network, the ERN, which is a cross-sectoral group of economic regulators in Ireland. I think it's a really important development over the last number of years. The ERN is composed of the Central Bank, the ComReg, CCCP, Coimisiún, Meán, CRU, the National Transport Authority, and the Commission for Aviation Regulation. And all these regulators meet on a regular basis. And they approach the IIEA to have this event today, to not start the discussion, because the discussion has started, but to have a nuanced discussion on AI and how ready we are for that event. My name is Joyce O'Connor, and I chair, as Alex said, the digital group here at the IIEA. So it's my pleasure also to welcome our keynote speaker, Minister Niamh Smith. As I was saying to Niamh, our minister, earlier today, the last time I saw her was at the weekend on television, speaking again on digital transformation. And I think, Minister, you bring an energy and passion to the subject that's really very welcome. So we look forward to your presentation. We're also joined by a stellar panel here today. Jean Carberry's Assistant Secretary, the Department of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, Dr. Harsh Padot from our Professor, Harsh Padot from DCU, Noel Doody, Managing Director of Data and AI from Accenture, and Trevor Fitzpatrick, Head of Risk Analysis, Data and Analytics and Reporting Division at the Central Bank of Ireland. So we look forward to your panel and our panel discussion. But we will begin with a keynote speak from the Minister. And Minister, we're really looking forward to this presentation, because I think this is such an important subject, such one that it's not just for the nerds, the technologists, it's for all society, for civil society, business, everybody. And I think you bring that kind of approach to it that will be inclusive. So we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Isn't it just wonderful to be in this beautiful building full of character? I've been to so many modern buildings that are beautiful in their own way, but it is these buildings that have stories to tell if the walls could talk. I know there's probably, you know, the age-old problem with energy and plumbing and all those kinds of things, but at the same time, coming into a building like this, it is just gorgeous. And thank you very much to the team for inviting me here today. It is a great pleasure to be with you, and I have to concur with everything Alex said and Joyce in relation to the portfolio that I hold, which is, excuse me, trade promotion, artificial intelligence and digitalisation. When our boss, my boss, Micheál Martin, rang me to ask me would I take this portfolio, I said, yes, Yes, please. That sounds great to me. And from the first day I arrived in the department, I have felt that very same excitement. Of course, we have worries and concerns around AI, but in the area that I work, along with my very salubrious official here, Jean Carberry, for us, it is all about enterprise. That is our area of responsibility, but also mindful of the fact that AI will cross every sector of our public service, within government and within the private sector as well, and it will have its implications. So our role and my role is to ensure that we have, I suppose, the guardrails in place to ensure that while we develop AI, that we do protect our citizens, which I think is critically important. So good morning to you all, or good afternoon as it is now, distinguished guests, fellow policymakers and members of Ireland's regulatory community. I know we have guests joining us online, which is great. COVID taught us one thing of how we can do things in a hybrid fashion and allows people to join in from all over, which is great. Thank you to the IIEA and the Economic Regulators Network for hosting this vital discussion on getting Ireland AI ready. The collaboration between these institutions perfectly embodies the cross-sectoral approach that we need to navigate AI's transformative potential responsibly. As AI reshapes how we work, communicate and provide services to our citizens, the question before us today is not whether Ireland can become AI ready, but how we can leverage our existing strengths to lead into a new era. Ireland's excellent regulatory ecosystem and regulators provide us an excellent foundation upon which we can build our AI leadership. The Economic Regulators Network gathered here today represents decades of regulatory excellence. From the Central Bank to ComReg to CCP and to the CRU, our regulators continue to provide excellent stewardship of our financial system, our digital infrastructure, critical utilities and consumer rights. And Ireland has cultivated a regulatory environment that is both robust and innovation friendly. This is not accidental. It reflects a deliberate choice to build institutions that are proportionate, effective and responsive to technological change. As we face the AI revolution, these same principles will serve us well. Ireland's national AI strategy, AI Here for Good, refreshed in November 2024, provides our roadmap for becoming AI ready. And I have to say, before I ever landed in the department, I was hugely impressed how the department itself and our officials have been so agile, because as we know with AI, it is ever changing. It's ever transformative, and as soon as a document is printed, of course, we know that the technology is changing, and the officials in that department have demonstrated that absolute agility in terms of how they have continued to refresh our policy and our framework around that as the technology develops as well. The strategy rests on three pillars that directly support our regulatory excellence agenda, which is 1, building trust, 2, putting the infrastructure in place, and 3, driving AI adoption and innovation. AI for Good ensures that we embrace AI innovation, and we do so in the public interest. Our regulators play a critical role in ensuring AI applications improve public services, address societal challenges, and promote sustainability while maintaining the highest standards of protections. An AI innovation ecosystem builds bridges between our academic excellence, industrial leadership, and regulatory expertise. Our regulators have a vital role in ensuring AI literacy extends beyond technical communities to include all citizens who interact with AI-enabled services. Building on this foundation, the government has agreed to update our national digital strategy and AI strategy during 2025, signalling Ireland's unwavering ambition to remain a global digital leader. These updated strategies will outline Ireland's ambition to developing our domestic AI capabilities, including accelerating the adoption of AI to drive public service delivery and reform. Our commitment to regulatory excellence is embedded at the highest level of government. And I know recently you would have seen my colleague Jack Chambers, responsibility for public expenditure, announcing the AI guardrails, if you like, around our public service, which is critically important as well, and just shows how it does come from the top down and also from the bottom up, if I may use that expression for my own area as a Minister of State, that we are doing it across all government departments. Our commitment to regulatory excellence is embedded at the highest level. The Programme for Government 2025 positions AI as a cornerstone of Ireland's future development and outlines a comprehensive approach to the technological transformation across sectors from education to law enforcement. The EU AI Act is a watershed instrument in the governance of AI. The government is fully committed to the comprehensive implementation of this landmark legislation. And I'm pleased to share with you that that work is well underway to deliver a well-resourced and efficient implementation, which will provide certainty and, most importantly, transparency for our businesses and citizens alike. And I know my good colleague and official, Jean Carberry, will refer to that more in her panel discussion today. Ireland is not just preparing to be AI ready. We are positioning ourselves to lead in an AI era. Our regulatory excellence, built over decades and strengthened by our commitment to proportionate, effective oversight, gives us a foundation that few jurisdictions can match. The collaboration between the IIEA and the Economic Regulators Network hosted here today's events demonstrates that cross-sectoral approach that will define our success. Only by bringing together policy expertise, regulatory experience and industry insight will we drive the responsible AI development and adoption that we are aiming for. Ireland's ambition is to become the jurisdiction of choice for responsible AI development. In a world where AI governance is becoming increasingly complex, Ireland offers something unique: a regulatory environment that is sophisticated enough to handle AI's complexity, experienced enough to adapt to technological change, and trusted enough to maintain public confidence. We will continue to invest in our regulatory capabilities, supporting our regulators' professional development and ensuring our regulatory framework evolves with the technological advancement. As Minister for Trade Promotion, AI and Digital Transformation, I am committed to working with all of our stakeholders, including our exceptional regulators, to ensure that Ireland harnesses AI transformation with the potential and while protecting the values and rights we hold dearly. The AI revolution is upon us, and Ireland is ready to shape it. Through regulatory excellence, we will ensure that Ireland's AI future is one of innovation, prosperity and trust. So thank you all very much for listening to me today. I would love to be here for the discussion among the panel, but just to wish you all well and enjoy your afternoon. Gur míle maigad gath.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think you've set the tone and the context for the panel discussion. I think in many ways, it's interesting you've said that we're not just ready, but we're in a position to lead. And that's maybe something we'll come back to, because, as you said, it's all cross-sectoral. It's about integration of departments, academia, civil society, industry, can't forget industry, and all of those coming together. So in many ways, we will follow on that conversation now. Are we ready to shape the future, and how can we go about doing that? So thank you very much for that really important and key presentation, Minister. And we wish you all the best at our question time, leaders' question time today. Yes, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. We'll now move on to our panel discussion. And I'm going to invite each panelist to make a presentation for around 10 minutes. And then I'll go to you, our audience here in the IIEA, and to our audience online. For those attending online, you can send in your questions the usual way in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And those of you who are here, if you put up your hand in the usual way to ask questions, we'll come to you then. I'd very much appreciate if you give your name and organisation that you're involved in when you're asking these questions. As usual, the Q&A and all the presentations here are on the record. And if you want to join in the discussion on X, please do so using the handle at IIEA. Now, we're moving on to our panel, and this is an expert panel. I'm really pleased to introduce them because they will explore the opportunities, risks for the people and firms in Ireland. The Minister has given that context very inclusive. We will discuss how AI is harnessed in a safe manner. How can we develop trust? What are the emerging policy issues, including the implementation and supervision of the AI Act? You know, August the 2nd, 2025 is nearly upon us. And we're looking also, and the Minister has referred to this, to the speed of technological change and how we can really ensure that we've trustworthy AI and innovation. So I'm going to ask each of our panel to introduce themselves and their title and the focus of their presentation. This event will finish at 2:30, so we'll have good time for questions from you, the audience, both here and online. So Jean Carberry, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. So I'm Jean Carberry. I'm an Assistant Secretary at the Department of Enterprise, Tourism and Employment, and I lead on digital. So do you want me to go into my presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So in January, a group of officials went over to Silicon Valley on a fact-finding mission and it convinced me more even than I already was convinced that with every week that goes by, it becomes more clear that AI is going to completely change the way we work and the way we live. So one of the important roles of government is to put the guardrails in place to make sure that that can happen in a way that is safe for our citizens and for our workers. So a big part of my job is to create the governance system here in Ireland for the AI revolution. And I'll just talk about some of the elements of that governance system. So the primary text is the EU AI Act, which is a cross-cutting, risk-based instrument that governs the deployment and use of AI in the European Union. So the first thing to say about the Act is that it was specifically designed so that for most uses of AI, they will be very little impacted by the Act at all. So there isn't a big regulatory burden for most people who are using AI, because if you're using AI in a way that doesn't present any risks to health and safety or fundamental rights, then there are little, if any, obligations on you. So people using it for various efficiencies, people using AI on their phones, there's very little impact of the AI Act there. Where it does focus in on is high-risk use of AI, and it also specifies 8 prohibited practices, which are things that are under no circumstances allowed to be done using AI. It calls out 12 high-risk products and 8 high-risk use cases. And so these are ways in which you can use AI, but in a very managed way. So once the controls are in place, the AI can be used for these purposes. But if you don't have the right controls in place, there are very heavy fines, up to 35 million. So it is an instrument with a lot of teeth for those high-risk activities. And the way the Commission or the way the EU approached developing these high-risk cases is essentially, to put it simply, if something, it protects fundamental rights. So if AI is used in a way that could affect your life, your safety, your health, or your well-being, that it's likely to be in a high-risk basket case. So let me give you a nice example, which is lifts. If AI is used in a lift, in the safety mechanism of a lift, well, clearly if the lift goes wrong, you could plunge thousands of feet and to your death. So that's obviously a high-risk use of AI. So that's going to come under the ambit of high-risk use cases for the Act. So the final category under the Act is transparency. So there are also areas where if AI is being used, it has to be disclosed that that it is in fact AI. So if you're talking to a chatbot, there needs to be a declaration that this is an AI system. It's not a human. So that's the final category under which AI is regulated under the Act. So and then at the 11th hour, there was also part of the Act, it moved away from the high risk piece because there are some provisions whereby generative AI or general purpose AI systems most of this is regulated at the use, but general purpose AI systems will be regulated at the actual development point of the chain. So, and that will be a Commission competency. And at the moment, codes of practice are being developed to give more detail to that piece of it. But here in Ireland, it's the Department of Enterprise which has been charged with giving effect to this Act. So we have there's a government decision that says for the high risk cases we will take a distributed model. So which makes a lot of sense, because essentially if you're looking at something like regulation of lifts, regulation of medical devices, it's the sectoral expertise that is important rather than the AI expertise. So we have a range of bodies across the system who are already responsible for these highly regulated sectors, such as Trevor here in the central bank, because clearly financial services is an area where AI could be used if it wasn't properly regulated to turbocharge mis-selling or various bad things. And so if you think to yourself, areas that are already heavily regulated because in some way they represent some danger to the citizen are going to have this added feature where if AI is used, the AI Act will come into place. But so that's the market surveillance system. We then will be putting in place a central authority which will coordinate and make sure that that all of the market surveillance bodies are working in tandem together. It will also be the lead regulator for the prohibited practices, and it will make sure that there's a streamlined and uniform approach across the Irish system to implementation of the AI Act. Now, unfortunately, I only have a couple more minutes before my 10 minutes is up. I should mention that when tech companies talk about overregulation, it's often GDPR that they're referring to rather than the AI Act, because as I'm sure I don't have to tell you, data is an essential part of the creation of the AI model. So GDPR is a whole separate piece that we're not going to get into today. But in addition to the AI Act, standards are very important. So another body under the auspices of my department, the NSAI, has been working with the European bodies for standards development for at least the last 3 or 4 years to develop a comprehensive set of standards for AI. And so any AI systems that people put into use will have the same CE mark that we're familiar with. So all of your toys or products that you use have this little mark to certify that they are safe. And so AI systems will also get this mark. So that will be part of the governance system, that there are standards and the standards are enforced, and then there's market surveillance, and then we will have this central body which will be enforcing the fines and the prohibited practices. So I probably don't have a lot more time, but I'll just very quickly touch on that we do, as the Minister said, have a national AI strategy, AI Here for Good, and trust is at the center of that strategy. So everything we do is to make sure that people feel safe and secure in using and harnessing the great power of AI. And one of the innovations that we put in place when we launched the strategy was our AI ambassador, Patricia Scanlon, who I'm sure you've all heard speaking. So that was one of the many things we're doing to try to build trust. And Joyce is telling me I'm at the end, so I'll just give you a teaser. The impact of AI on the labour market is an emerging issue. So that may be something we might want to discuss at a later point as well. And certainly something that in our department we're very close to. So thank you for your attention.
Well done. Thank you very much, Jean, and you're absolutely on time. You're perfect. Thank you very much for looking at that overview of governance and implementation. As you say, there's a number of issues that come out of that, and I'm sure we'll return to them later into the discussion. Our next speaker is Professor Harsh Pandit, and Harsh, over to you now.
Thank you. So, as I was introduced, my name is Harsh, and I'm currently an assistant professor in DCU, but next week I'll start as a researcher in the AI Accountability Lab in Trinity. And that sort of gives you a hint of what I'm going to talk about, which is all about AI and accountability. So to start with, I think it's very pragmatic to be realistic about what is AI and where is the reality versus where is the hype. So yes, both the benefits are true. It's potentially going to be drastically changing our lives. But at the same time, we have to realize that a lot of it is also hyped up, and we tend to focus more on where it will work versus where it won't work, because that's just the nature of the game. So the knowledge of where it does work and how sure are we about it, and where it does fail and how sure are we about that, and are we prepared to deal with the consequences when it doesn't work, I think that's the foundation framework that we have to establish both in the Irish society as well as in general life. But what does this look like? What does this depend on? So we say AI this and AI that, but in reality, AI is now two distinct disciplines. One is based on what used to be machine learning. So this is your statistical mathematical models where you take some data and you see, okay, what does the data tell us? Versus now we have the generative AI, which is dreaming machines, hallucinations. So it's generating things and you cannot predict ahead of time how it's going to work. So the nature of how these two different technologies work and how they operate and how they fail is very different. And which is also why the AI Act deals with them in two separate ways. So we have to understand that now we are dealing with two different types of AI and we cannot treat them the same way. And what this means is that it results in a very complex ecosystem where it's not just one entity deciding I'm going to use AI and I'm going to take my data, I'm going to develop my own generative AI model. There's a whole ecosystem of actors who collect the data, who train the model, who pass on the model, who refine the model, who turn it into a product, who then provide it as a service, to finally the entity that decides, okay, this is how I'm going to use it in my use case. The GDPR and AI Act model really operates at the ends of this ecosystem, just because it's very difficult to regulate everything from the start. But it means that a large part of this ecosystem is not subject to these regulations directly. They come into play when something goes wrong or because the end actor is pulled under the GDPR or the AI Act. Whereas when we think about trust, it's a very difficult concept. Trust. Trust in what? Trust about what? And I always like to give this analogy about a car. Like when you get in a car, you don't trust who manufactured the screw. You don't trust who manufactured the brakes. You trust that the car provider has sold you a car and not a lemon. And if something goes wrong, you go to the car provider and say, you were at fault. You sold me something that was faulty. And the car provider says, well, the brakes that sold to me were faulty. So we haven't yet established this type of relationship between all these actors. And unfortunately, the Commission has pulled back or canceled the AI Liability Directive, which we all hoped had this type of a structure to provide clarity and structure to the market to center around. So in the absence of that, I think Ireland should have its own understanding of how liability and accountability is going to work, because without that, we cannot have any enforcement that is meaningful. And it's an undue burden on only one entity who is using AI at the end, whereas what we want is the accountability to flow from the very start. This brings me to my second part, which is that when we talk about progress, we want progress with accountability, not versus accountability. So if you pay attention to the current policy scenario, the Commission has launched a very ambitious program on simplification. They want to simplify laws because they perceive it as a burden on SMEs and smaller enterprises, which is true. But it doesn't mean that we should get rid of regulation. We want to make it easy for organizations to understand and to do the right thing by default, not that they have to take on more work at the end. But how do we do this without the backing of the government, without the backing of the policy, without the backing of the technical actors? And this is, I think, a unique place where Ireland can be the leader, because Ireland is one of the foundational hubs of technology in Europe. But Ireland is also one of the leaders in how small enterprises and organizations, especially SMEs and startups, just pop up and are incredibly successful in areas that we didn't traditionally associate with the Irish economy. So if we want progress and trust, we have to work from accountability at the start, which means that if you're developing a machine learning model, you have to be able to prove to the next organization that you have done your due diligence, who has to provide that trust to the next organization, and so on and so forth. Without this ecosystem of trust, we cannot trust the actor at the end to give you a safe and secure AI product. And we cannot believe the marketing claims that, yes, it is safe. We need some common understanding, some standards, some certifications, which don't just look at the stuff at the end, but also look at all of the ecosystem for how it was developed. And this is how, through hundreds of years, we have developed our manufacturing industries, we have developed our agricultural industries, and I'm very proud to be in the EU, where both of these are to an incredibly high standard compared to the rest of the world. So rather than rediscovering the wheel, we already have done this twice. So we should try to repeat more of this. AI is not a new thing in this sense. It's another piece of technology, it's another piece of product. And the AI Act does take into account by reusing the mechanisms for product certification and so on. Which brings me to the last part, which is the difficulties in doing this. We all want AI shouldn't harm people, AI shouldn't affect people. But can we avoid it? Can we prevent it? Can we identify whom do we need to warn about this? So in a lot of cases, we can, but it doesn't happen because of many reasons. And this is something where Ireland's political reality also comes into play, where we cannot simply assume certain things will work out in a certain things. We also have to think about our economy, about how we want to facilitate the organizations while also not prohibiting them too much. So how to strike that balance depends on, do you have enough tools at your disposal that you can nudge everybody towards the right direction? And these tools have to be political, have to be organizational, codes of conduct, standards, etc. But they also have to be cultural and societal. Do the people trust AI technologies? Do they know how to identify riskful and harmful technologies or not? So when we do this type of research and we look at whether regulations like the AI Act will succeed or not, we don't study the AI Act in isolation. We study it in an ecosystem of other regulations. I know you mentioned that we won't be looking too much into the GDPR, but when we went through all the high-risk applications in the AI Act's Annex 3, for example, most of them, if not all, are subject to GDPR. So the reality is that this is already including personal data by design. This is already including it by definition, which means that all of these cases will also be subject to the GDPR's requirements. So rather than waiting for the ecosystem to figure this out, I think if we provide clarity and stability and some guideline as Ireland for organizations, we can fulfill both objectives of promoting growth as well as promoting safety and security. The counterpoint to that is that if we don't, we keep reacting to harmful stuff as it happens. And if you let stuff happen in this way, it keeps on increasing. So just a couple of days ago, there was a new security risk in Copilot where all you had to do was send someone an email with invisible instructions. And because Copilot is processing it in the background, it will automatically read those instructions and reply back with sensitive data or whatever other things could be in the email. Now, for most people, this is new and shocking, but for someone like me who has worked in cybersecurity and just computational stuff for a long time, we know this kind of attacks. They happen with the forms that you fill on the websites all the time. So it's not that we have to look at AI as something different. We have to just identify whom to hold accountable, whom to say that you have to figure out how to get your product safe and secure. Because without this, we're going to be repeating the same mistakes and we are going to be repeating the same cases again and again. And that takes time and money, and that's not good. And the final points to make is that harms don't appear in a vacuum. Harms don't suddenly materialize. They propagate. It could be a tiny technical fault, it could be a user fault, but it takes multiple instances of risks and incidents to materialize before someone is actually harmed. So rather than focusing on the harm at the end, we also have to focus on how to prevent everything at each point in the so-called supply chain. Otherwise, what we will get is what I call the ChatGPT equivalent of the cookie pop-ups. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants them, but yet we are stuck with them because that industry is now so pervasive that it's incredibly difficult to get it out, even if we want to. So now we have the chance not to create another monster. We can do something that is beneficial by design, and we can also promote economic growth that is responsible right from the start. So I leave on a positive but pragmatic note to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Harsh. That is food for thought, because I think you've emphasized very clearly the importance of accountability and trust, but also that we can learn from the past, that we can build on what we're good at and what we know. And of course, that has the benefit of engaging people on something that they're familiar with. We now move on to Trevor Fitzpatrick. Trevor, thank you very much.
I was advised to leave the stage. Now I understand why, and then walk around. So I went to old school. I brought paper to an AI talk, which is says something about me probably in the stage I'm at in my life. So I just want to say thanks to the Institute on behalf of the ERN, and thanks to the Minister and to Jean as our AI board member for Ireland for being here as well. And thanks to the panelists and to you, the audience here and online. So we talked a little bit about AI presenting significant opportunities for society as a whole and for financial services. And I think Harsh touched on it as a little bit as well. That opportunity requires a balance of interests. So there's opportunities for us to be more productive, to grow, to provide better outcomes for society as a whole, and where there are risks, to make sure that we mitigate them in a proportionate and risk-based manner. So I wanted to step back a little bit, and I think also Harsh had touched on it. Why regulate at all? So why does regulation exist in the first place? So in a financial system, a well-functioning financial system underpins a well-functioning economy. And the economy is central to the financial well-being of our citizens, our businesses, and that's the same in Ireland and across the EU. So that's kind of important to remember, and it's maybe making things slightly unpopular given the current vibes around the world about regulation. But regulation provides certainty, stability, and trust. And I think a few of the panelists had already talked about that as well. So just maybe talk a little bit about the public concerns about AI. So despite its promise and all of the opportunities that it has, there is public concern about AI, and it's real. And that's understandable. So our DPC colleagues did a recent survey that showed about 61% of Irish people are concerned or very concerned about the use of AI in Ireland. And while we don't have a comparable survey for Ireland, in the UK, about 72% of people in the UK believe that laws and regulation would increase their confidence in the use of AI. 65% want accountability, so they're all things that have been said already. And 61% would like or to demand clear explanations of AI decisions that affect them personally. So the AI Act, as Jean kind of outlined it in a lot of detail, it isn't financial services specific, it's economy-wide, and it's about protecting citizens' fundamental rights. So the government have chosen the hybrid regulatory approach. That decision has been made, and now we're into implementation. And for our regulators, for ourselves in the bank, this is our chance to collaborate nationally and internationally, because this will be an EU piece, to learn from each other, to be humble, to share knowledge, and then also to effectively supervise together when we need to. This means understanding the context, the use of AI, and the risks across the entire system. So not just looking at individual pieces of the puzzle, but looking at the full jigsaw. So what will be regulated and how? So Jean kind of outlined that in a lot of detail. So the EU has essentially answered that what will be regulated. So we have high risk, and in financial services, it will be creditworthiness assessment and life and health insurance. There's a product safety approach, and then there's regulation of general purpose AI at the kind of technology level. So the bank will be responsible for regulating financial services where they're used to provide that service. So the use of AI in financial services. And we'll be working with our colleagues across the system here, with DEET and with the EU AI office, who will be leading on generative AI. And there's a lot of work to do yet. I think we have 13 months and 1 week to the start of supervision. So for us, the AI Act has to exist within the existing body of regulation. It applies to financial services, but it applies to other sectors as well. So it has to sit in on top of the existing regulations, and we're working hard to make sure that there's less overlaps and clarity about how the Act will be applied. But one of the ways we think about AI is it can get quite complex. We think about inputs, we think about the use of algorithms, we think about the decisions, the outputs, and then we think about the things that kind of cut across all of that, like governance and cybersecurity. So we are also then thinking about what's new with that and what's different. And so some of the newer aspects for the bank and maybe for other MSAs would be, there are going to be some algorithmic specific risks, so multiplicity or poor explanations without recourse for people. And this also includes evaluating generative AI, because the way that you evaluate that and its safety is very different, as Harsh had mentioned, to machine learning, which when I started looking at this is what AI was. It was machine learning, but that's about 15 years ago. So it's been a while. So because this is a big tent event, and because we want this to be a conversation starter, I wanted to put a couple of questions out there that might help the discussion a little bit later. So first big question was, do you think AI is a platform shift or a paradigm shift for society? So if it's a platform shift, it might be like the transition to cloud, or you see generative AI as being going to change everything. And so I think a lot of that comes down to whether you believe that there's a fundamental breakthrough in reasoning and learning. And the jury is still out for me. So personally, I'm a pragmatic optimist when it comes to AI, but I like to see the evidence. So we've had decades of scoring models in financial services. We've had about 15 years of machine learning at scale in our lives. We've about 3 years of incomplete data for generative AI. So I think the jury's still out a little bit. And then we had some recent research the last couple of weeks. We've had Apple Research produced a paper criticizing the reasoning of generative AI models. Salesforce on a kind of particular type of application of generative AI called agentic evaluation. And we had Anthropic on agentic AI safety. And as Harsh had mentioned, these kind of point out kind of known issues already, plus some new ones, which are a bit strange and interesting. So that's kind of the first big question. I think the second big question is, how do we understand AI's impact at the use case, at enterprise level, and at the economy-wide level? I think right now the impact is, it seems to be productive, but I think in general it's quite poorly understood. In terms of the risk, I think we're pretty good understanding of the risks in machine learning. I think we're at the start of understanding the risks in terms of generative AI. And in terms of productivity, so daily to weekly generative AI adoption sits at about 30 to 40%. So that's kind of like daily or weekly average user for generative AI apps. That means about 60 to 70% of users are not frequent users. So this also varies a lot by age and income. So adoption is about the use, the continued use. It's not just about the availability of the tool. So that's maybe something for us to think about. Where there are productivity gains and there's high quality evidence. So the UK Civil Service did a recent trial of a generative AI tool. The median time saving was about 30 minutes per day for their civil service. So there was, I think, 15,000 civil servants took part in the trial. So it's good quality evidence. That kind of bakes out to about 13 FTE days a year, or about 0.05 FTE, or full-time equivalent. So it's not spectacular, but over the whole civil service, it might be. Our own internal experiments in the bank, where we've done a version of this on a much smaller scale, showed that there was about a 20 to 30% improvement in terms of quality and timeliness for some tasks. And then from other tasks, it was actually negative. So it affected your undertaking of the task badly. So that kind of mirrors the emerging knowledge about kind of knowledge work research. I think we made a lot of progress in terms of understanding machine learning risks and capabilities. I think generative AI is one of the new ones. And the reason why that's difficult is because it's a model's capability that's a large language model. It depends on the context for its use. And the current approaches to evaluating this context are kind of brittle, which means that your evaluation science is just at the start of getting to know how to do that as well. So that's very interesting. We're happy that we've got lots of representatives from academia and industry here as well that will also help maybe develop some better evaluation standards in future. The third kind of big question is the velocity of development. I think all of the panelists so far have touched on this, and the minister did it in her way as well. I saw my first draft of the AI Act in 2021. By 2022, it was out of date. They had to do a rewrite because of generative AI. So that illustrates our challenge. Let's design a regulatory system that enables innovation and keeps pace, like Jean was saying. That means also establishing credible guardrails and making sure that the system as a whole can supervise the next thing and the next thing after that. And I think that's kind of one of our guiding lights in the bank. I think there's a couple of practical challenges too. I'll kind of stop with two of them. So one is, what is AI is still up for discussion under the AI Act, which is interesting given that we are 13 months out from supervision. So I think we're working with the AI office, and the AI office themselves, I think, will want to clarify that. The standards and guidance, which I think some of the folks touched on as well, and I know we have some people in the room who also work on that. Those developments must pace with the implementation timeline. It's really important to have a workable glide path rather than a series of emergency landings where standards just appear the week before something has to come into force. That doesn't really help policymakers, it doesn't help firms, and it doesn't help regulators effectively implement this. So let's see how that goes. And then there's a longer term, more interesting topic to do with EU case law and non-discrimination standards. So I think we touched a little bit about GDPR, Harsh had in his remarks. So in GDPR, the balance is on people vindicating their rights after the fact, after something has happened. The AI Act is interesting because it's trying to impose some sort of standard for prospective fairness or bias at a data or a modeling stage, compared to the retrospective application of individual fairness in EU non-discrimination law. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert on this, and I know some people in the room are. How this all will work out, including the role of the courts in settling this, in interpreting the AI Act, remains to be seen. And I think it is something that we'll be coming back to. So to conclude, we stand at an important juncture. AI offers a lot of genuine opportunities. Realizing them requires effective policy implementation. And our national implementation, we hope, will be clear, proportionate, effective, and adaptive. And that framework is now emerging, but we need to work on it further for the next 13 months. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Trevor. I think you set out the opportunities very clearly, but I think in the series of questions that you posed, I think which were really important, it raises the issue that this is a continuous development and the need for clarity and having a system that is responsive all the way through the changes, not only in the technology, but in also expectations of people, in society as well. So thank you very much for that. Noelle, it's your turn now. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Joyce. So as I said, my name is Noelle Toody. I lead the data and AI team in Accenture Ireland. So Accenture is a global technology consultancy. And I'll just be talking a little bit about some of our research on AI and generative AI, and also what I'm seeing in terms of the application of these technologies with our clients across all different industries, in Ireland in particular. So similar to Harsh, I actually think of AI both almost before ChatGPT, so before November 22 and after, so the BG and AG. So I guess some of the characteristics, before ChatGPT, I worked with a lot of clients who were using machine learning statistical methods very successfully to, do reporting, generate insights, diagnose problems, predict and forecast different events, and also to optimize different things. And those people would typically, they would be quite heavily involved in technology and be using very structured data and be using quite specific and in some cases quite niche tools to do so, and have to have the skills to do that. And then I think the advent of technologies like ChatGPT, it allowed people to interact with this technology in a much more natural language way. So it was much more accessible. The information, it opened it out to both structured and unstructured information as well. And as the Minister and a number of other people have said, the technology has evolved at a very, very rapid rate. So we're seeing the models become more performant in terms of their accuracy. We're seeing, kind of the lowering of cost in terms of the amount of tokens you get. And again, we're just seeing increased access. So, I've lost count of the number of apps that I open now on my phone, and you can automatically, see embedded AI, and you're interacting with it, almost every day. So what that has meant for us in Accenture is that, it's not just the technologists that are coming to us now to talk about AI. The questions on AI could come from almost any part of the organization. And we've seen a huge upsurge in people looking to come to do AI and generative AI sessions in our Gen AI studio. As Trevor said, we do see a huge opportunity in terms of productivity. So our research is telling us that up to 70% of people could have up to a third of their working hours, changed in some way due to this technology, whether it's through assistance or augmentation or automation. And we're also seeing, the potential to automate or to certainly augment a lot of very routine tasks. So again, our research is saying that the average Irish worker could have up to 17% of their routine tasks and time freed up with this technology. And I think we see that there's a big opportunity to release capacity with that. So again, our research showed that nearly a third of people told us in our recent survey just before Christmas in Ireland, a third of respondents said that they didn't feel that their creativity was being used to its full effect in their current role. So we see a big opportunity for this technology to potentially help release that creativity for people. From a market perspective, we are seeing a lot of enthusiasm. So again, our research and our respondents in terms of the executives, 85% of the respondents were saying that they were experimenting with this technology in their organizations in some way. There are challenges in terms of scaling that, and I'll come on to that in a minute, because less than 10% of the respondents said that they had scaled it in a meaningful way. But we're also seeing as well, there's a lot of individual enthusiasm. So again, nearly half of the respondents were saying that where they didn't have access to some of these AI assistant tools in their organizations, they were trying to actually actively go out and get access to them through their organization. And we also saw very positive messages, probably actually coming from some of the more power users, as you were saying, like the more frequent users, as you were saying, Trevor. So people who were quite frequent users had positive experience and could identify opportunities for this technology to, say, for example, improve their, some of the responses were improve their fulfillment at work, probably because they were removing some of the more mundane tasks potentially. And in our survey, more people felt that AI, and particularly generative AI, had the potential to accelerate rather than decelerate their career, which I thought was interesting, because I know that there have been some concerns more broadly. And in terms of just an anecdote from the market, one client I work with, they were doing a pilot on the access to generative AI tools. And I know there are some challenges in terms of really accurately measuring some of the benefits. But one of the questions that this particular client asked their participants was, would you object if I took the tools away? And the overwhelming answer was, yes, I would object, which I thought was interesting. And then I guess just some of the challenges. So I mentioned, there is a challenge to get to scale. I think some of that has to do with, I guess, some of the data and digital foundations. So again, in our survey, it was only about 20% of executives said they felt they had the foundations to scale in the way that they wanted to, that they felt that was already in place. I think there is probably also a skills challenge as well. Again, our research is showing that in order to get the most out of these tools, people need to be reskilled to collaborate effectively with these AI tools. And again, our research is saying that there could be up to 64% of people may need, some form of AI upskilling or reskilling. And there is also, was an interesting point of our research was that people who were in larger corporations or potentially multinational corporations were more likely to have access to the tools as well, which was just an interesting part. And the last point is just around trust. Again, when we ask the question, do you kind of trust that this technology will be implemented in the most beneficial way? Unfortunately, less than half of the respondents responded positively to that question. One thing I am seeing, though, with individual organizations is I do see a real sense of responsibility with this technology. So just two examples, one organization that I'm working with, they have run a number of successful pilots, but they have specifically said they do not want to scale until they are comfortable that they have the right responsible AI frameworks in place. And then another organization that I'm working with, they actively have disabled or deactivated some particular functionalities that they had access to, again because they weren't comfortable that they could kind of govern and control them in the way that they wanted to. So I am seeing some very responsible behavior. And then I just close, I guess, by saying globally, Accenture has delivered well in excess of 1,000 generative AI projects at this point. And some of the, I suppose, key success factors we found is, one, being really clear about why you actually want to use AI, what's the value you're going to get from it, rather than just, something that you want to do, and using it for the sake of using it. The second one is around just building a very solid data and digital foundation. The third area is just thinking about the people impact, and that's what a lot of our clients always talk about when they're talking about AI, is the impact on people. And then finally is implementing it in a responsible and controlled way.
Very much, Noelle, thank you. That's